Hello, I'm Dr. Greg Winteregg, CEO of the Private Dentist Alliance. I want to talk to all of you students out there today who are wondering what your future is going to be like as a career in dentistry. As an assistant, as a hygienist, as a dentist, where is this profession going with the rapid increase of the DSO movement? I'm here to tell you that PDA is going to help you, and I want you to become a member today. It is free. Now, why should you become a member? You're going to get weekly video updates from me, and you're going to get regular updates of our newsletters from the Alliance on exactly what is happening and how we are going to help preserve and protect the private practice of dentistry. Now, to me, the most important advantage is you are going to get access to our job board. What is that? Our private practicing members all have access to our PDA job board, which means if they have an opening in their private practice of assistant, hygienist, doctor, front office staff, they're going to be able to post it. And you're going to be able to check up regularly. And as our membership grows, we're going to be covering larger and larger territories across the United States. If you are looking for a job in any position in the office of a private practice, you need to become a student member today. It is free. Go to www.privatedental.org and become a student member today. You're going to love your benefits. Do it now.
What is up, guys? It's your boy Matt Havas back at it again with the Dental Student Vibes podcast, and today we have a very special interview for you, kind of a different take on how we normally do interviews, but we think you'll enjoy it. So we had Travis Hornsby, the founder of Student Loan Planner, on, and we had him conduct a consultation for new dentist Dr. Lori Gruskin, and it was a super high yield interview. He goes through everything you need to know in terms of student loan repayment, to budgeting for cars, housing, shopping, and as well as a new take, how to plan for your wedding and the amount of money you should spend for it. Because at our age, a lot of us are getting married. We have a lot of friends getting married. So these are things that we've covered, and we hope you guys enjoy it. We hope you guys learned something. We know we learned a ton from speaking with Travis. So as always, follow us on Instagram at dental.student.vibes. Give us a like, comment, share it with a friend. Let us know what we can do to make this the best podcast we can for you. So let's remember to stay safe and vibe on.
Welcome back to another episode of the Dental Student Vibes podcast. I'm Seth Kalish. I'm here today with Matt Havas, and we have two very special guests with us. Dr. Lori Gruskin just graduated, and our very special guest from Student Loan Planner, Mr. Travis Hornsby. How are you guys doing today? Travis, Lori?
Good, thanks.
Doing well. Can't complain.
Yeah, we had a little trouble there setting everything up, but we got it all going. So today, I'm very excited to kind of just be a fly on the wall while you guys talk about student loans. Travis, you are the #1 expert on student loans. I mean, you're the only person I've heard talk. I mean, you've been on a ton of podcasts, and you say some real great stuff. You've got some great advice for students. So I'm really excited to hear what you've got to say.
Yeah, excited to dig into Lori's loan situation. So I guess my first question is always to tell me about yourself. So Lori, if you want to share a little bit about what's going on with your life, professionally, personally, loan-wise, that's kind of how I like to get started.
So do you want to know like where I'll be working and what my salary will be, like that?
Yeah, and feel free to anonymize however much you want.
So I have $400,000 in loans from dental school altogether. And I'm going to be starting at Aspen whenever I have my license and DEA license, hopefully within the next 2-3 weeks, ideally. And the daily rate there will be $5.50 a day. I could possibly make more from like the profit and loss statements, but it'll be like the minimum salary is $5.50 a day, which I think equates to about $140,000 a year.
It's not bad with all the stress the dental market's under from a labor perspective, right?
Right. So I'm going to recalculate it right now, actually. 550 times 5 times, say, 50 weeks, 137,500.
Okay, so certainly a little above average for an associate salary. So that's really good. That's definitely a positive. What about potential future, family plans in terms of like marriage? Because when you're paying your loans, the way the government designed the program, your future spouse's income and debt is highly relevant to figuring out what you should do. So if you're able to guess anything about that, what would you say?
So my, as of now, future spouse will have $400,000 in loans. So combined, we'll have around $800,000 together.
Okay.
And
Okay.
he will graduate in 2 years. So I'll have worked for 2 years prior to him working.
Okay. And then will he have a similar income and similar career goals as you, or what would you say about that?
I think ours align. I think his are even more driven than mine because I would like to be an associate or like work for someone for 2 to 3, 4 years. And I think it's actually Seth. He wants to own a practice as soon as possible.
So here's some thoughts. So you both have 400,000 of dental school debt. Combined, that's 800,000. What I typically tell people under the current rules is you'd really want to be making more than $800,000 combined to justify paying that off instead of pursuing loan forgiveness. So there's a couple reasons for that. One is I don't think that the tax bomb, which is the amount that you have to pay when your loans are forgiven, right now, under current rules, you have to pay income taxes on that amount. So if you were paying, percentage of your income and then you have this big amount forgiven, you have to pay income tax on that. I ultimately don't think they're actually going to take that money. So what does that mean for you, Lori? It means that basically you have two choices. You can pay, $4,000 a month for 10 years and be done with your loans, or you can pay, $7,000 a month, maybe be done in 5 years. Or alternatively, you can pay 10% of your income and try to get that 10% payment a lot lower by being smart with tax planning. So that's kind of a high level. So what are the chances that y'all combined will make more than $800,000? There's a possibility that you will, but if you were, and you weren't reducing that to a much lower number through careful tax planning, then that would be a little surprising, right? So one thing that I would say is if you're looking at forgiveness versus refinancing, deciding between that decision, it's to me pretty straightforward that you would do forgiveness versus refinancing, even if you happen to be particularly successful. And the theory is if you become practice owners and say you're making $500,000 a year, you could probably get that down to $300,000 or $400,000 of taxable income with careful tax planning. And student loan payments are ultimately just a percentage of your taxable income. So any questions about that so far?
I'm a little confused altogether, to be honest. Like I know you said that there's the choice of $4,000 a month or $7,000, and that would be if we wanted to pay off our loans completely. But then you mentioned loan forgiveness of 10% of our salary. Like I'm just a little confused.
Sure. So you can, when you graduate, you can just choose to pay 10% of your income towards your student loans. After 20 to 25 years, any remaining balance is forgiven. And if you're working in the private sector, that forgiveness, so say, for example, you're paying $1,000 a month and say you do that for 20 years.
Okay.
So, $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year for 20 years, that's $240,000.
Right.
So that's a lot less than $400,000. So that means you would still have a balance that would be left over after 20 years of payments. That would be forgiven, and you'd have to pay income taxes on any leftover balance that's remaining.
So if there was $250,000 remaining, what would I pay on that at the end?
So assuming you're living in Florida, you'd probably have to pay it at the top federal tax rate. So right now that's 37%. Probably it might be more like 40% to 50% at the time, when your loans would be forgiven. So let's say that you have and it's going to be higher than 260 or whatever, because there's also interest that accumulates, right? So that balance that you would have left over would be significantly higher than that, probably anywhere from 400 to 600,000. So you would have that forgiven, and you'd have to pay income tax of maybe 200,000 or so, all at once. Now you might say, well, why would I pay 240,000 over 20 years plus pay a big lump sum in taxes? So the reason why you might want to do that is because inflation. So things cost more over time. So if I have to buy a house in 20 years, I can guarantee you I'm going to have to pay a lot more than what I have to pay today. So for that same reason, the forgiven tax bomb of 200,000 or 300,000, whatever it is, it's actually going to be equivalent to a much lower figure represented in today's dollars. So that's a figure that I think, even if you plan for, forgiveness still makes more sense. But I think that it's not going to end up getting charged, because I think ultimately they're going to eliminate that tax bomb. And so then it's just very straightforward. It's two choices. You can pay your loans based on your income for 20 years, and then anything left over would be forgiven. Or you can say, well, because I'm going to pay my loans back in full before that 20 years is up, it makes more sense to get a lower interest rate and just try to pay my loans off. And a good time frame to try to pay your loans off is probably anywhere from 5 to 15 years. If you're doing 20 years, then why not roll the dice with forgiveness? So that's kind of my thought process. And with 400,000 of loans, if you paid 4,000 a month, that's going to get your loans done in about 10 years. That's a lot, right? If you're making 140,000 a year after taxes, let's say that's about 100,000. So you're talking about half of your income being eaten up by loan payments if you decided to pay your loans back.
Right.
So that would get in the way of some of your other goals, I'm going to guess.
I mean, yeah, because that's living on a much lower salary.
Right. I mean, you probably want to save some money, prepare for, your adult life, finally making an income, right? Probably maybe buy a car, prepare to buy a house. I mean, what are some of your goals that you're looking forward to in the first, say, 5 years out of school?
In the first 5 years, ideally, well, I'm going to go work for Aspen. So that is going to be for only the beginning of my career. And then ideally, I'd like to become an associate and then either buy into a group. I'd ideally like to buy into a group practice. I don't know if right now, prior to children, would be best for me to own a practice on my own because I'm a female, since I'm going to have children. And then if I was a solo practitioner, who's going to take over when I have kids? So I think ideally being part of a group practice would be best in the beginning of my career, since that's when I'll more than likely be having children. So that's a goal. A goal within the first 3 months of working would be to get a car, because I've always wanted a luxury car. So I'd love to hear what you think about that. And then I'd say, I guess maybe around the age of 35 to 37, I would like to have my big dream home. I don't know if that's an aggressive goal, because, my future husband's going to be a dentist too. So would having that $750,000 or $1 million home at the age of 35 be too aggressive of a goal? And to be able to still live comfortably and save?
So a couple thoughts on that. Nothing that I heard is at all compatible with the idea of paying $4,000 a month on your student loans, right? So you want to have the dream house, you want to have a nice car, you want to get rewarded for all the work that you did in school, right, Laurie?
Right.
And $4,000 a month in student loans is going to get in the way of all of that, especially if you want to save anything for a secure retirement.
Right.
So that's kind of showing why the forgiveness plan is a better option.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of how you would go about doing those things and what the goals and the kind of which things you do first. So you do need to have an emergency fund first.
Right.
So you do need to have an emergency fund before buying any kind of luxury vehicles or anything like that. So, 3 months worth of saving is probably adequate. So if you can save around $20,000 in the bank, hopefully you have a little bit of leftover loan money you could use to sort of jumpstart that emergency fund. But
Okay.
it would be a good idea to try to get about 20,000 in the bank before you decide to upgrade anything.
Okay.
So I would say while you're working towards that goal, it'd be good to put 5% of your income into your retirement account, which is going to be your 401k. And then also you're going to want to set up an investment account outside of your 401k. And that can be done simply through a company like Vanguard or Betterment.
Okay.
The good news is you don't have to put a lot into those companies. You can just put $100 a month into one of those companies just to get started and just ask it to be automated. For someone like you that I'm going to assume is not super into stock investing, is that fair?
That's very fair.
Yeah. So I would probably assume Betterment would be a better company for you to use for your investment account.
Betterment.
That's Betterment. Yeah, betterment.com. So you can do that on your own. So you don't need any guidance for that. You can just literally sign up and then have them deduct automatically $100 a month from your account. Eventually that 100 a month needs to be probably 1,000 a month just to make sure you have more than enough to cover the future tax bomb. But for now, we want to leave that at 100 a month.
Okay. So start with 100 and then go to 1,000.
Yeah, but 100 a month until some of these other goals are achieved, and then 5% into retirement.
Right.
And then and you're,
401k retirement.
and then you're working towards that $20,000 emergency fund.
Okay.
So, and also no credit card debt would be the other thing. But so once you've achieved no credit card debt and you've gotten the 5% into retirement, 100 a month in the non-retirement account, and you got the no credit cards and the emergency fund set in place, now you're okay to go buy a luxury vehicle. Now, what I would suggest is not buying a vehicle new. Some people, that's something that they don't want to do. I mean, I was looking for a Volvo XC90, something big, bulky, high safety ratings, because my wife and I are having our first baby. So we're excited. We're trying to get something nice, but a brand new Volvo SUV is about $80,000. And if we buy one that's 2 years old, I found one under warranty still for $40,000. So that's a big deal because, $40,000 after taxes is, equivalent to maybe, 8-9 months worth of work, maybe, or 6 months worth of work. Right. So the difference between the 2018 and the 2020 is probably not big enough for you to volunteer at the dental practice for 6 months. So that would be a suggestion. You don't have to follow it, but it would be a suggestion to look for something, 1 to 3 years old for the luxury vehicle. And if you have enough cash to purchase something.
Sorry, I was thinking 30 to 35,000 because I wanted to get like a SUV that was a year or two old, like an Audi or something like that. That was my.
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably would need to be it probably would need to be more like 2 years old, but for that price range. But you probably could find something that would work for that.
Right.
I like to tell people if you have the cash to just pay cash on Craigslist because of how much of a better deal you get versus going through a dealership, but that's not really an option for a lot of new grads. So I think that's a decent plan. So you've got your car, and then the next thing is, you want to be an associate for a couple of years. So ideally that 5% into retirement would eventually grow to being 19,500 into retirement. So it's about $750 per paycheck. So if you can make sure about $750 per paycheck is going into your 401k, you're going to guarantee that your retirement in your 60s is going to be taken care of.
Okay.
So that's not something that you think about right now, but it's super important later down the road that you have that, set up. So once you've achieved the max into your retirement account, now you need to think about your tax bomb account. So remember that thing that I had you set up way back, it's $100 a month. So now that thing needs to be $1,000 a month. So $1,000 a month and the max retirement accounts. Now your finances are set up well enough that if you can afford to do those two things, then you can afford to do anything. So your timeline about when to partner, when to be in a group practice should be determined based off of your life circumstances and what's best for you at this point. And in terms of you buying that house, what I'll tell you is that I tell people if you buy a house more than 2 times your household income. So let's say you're both working, both making 200K, times 2, and then times 2 for, this ratio that I'm telling you. So that's an $800,000 house. So if you go above $800,000, you can expect to work into your mid 60s. If you go below that, then you can expect to work into your mid 50s. So that's a general rule of thumb. So if you know that, and your dream home is a $600,000 home, then you're in great shape to do that as soon as you have someone else's income that can go along with yours to get a mortgage, basically.
Okay.
So that would be the thought process is, rent until you're ready to settle down. And, in terms of rent, it's generally better to split the expense with someone. Maybe that's a significant other, but maybe that's roommates, whatever it is. It's generally a pretty good idea to keep yourself very flexible before you're ready to buy into a practice and settle down somewhere, because you kind of want those things to happen at a similar time. So I'll just give you an example. Let's say you found a perfect opportunity for a group practice purchase buy-in, but it's an hour away from where you bought your house, right? Now you bought your dream house, transaction cost to sell it would be pretty high, and that would be pretty difficult for you to get a good deal. Right. You'd take a big hit with the transaction costs for switching houses. So for that reason, I suggest that you wait until you figure out your practice that you're looking to buy into, if you are looking to do that, to buy the big house. So that's just suggestion. It doesn't have to be that time frame, but that's the thought process.
Okay.
So questions so far?
So start with putting $100 a month into the investment fund, and should I start putting 1,000 like as soon as I can, or is there like a certain period, like time that would be best to, like when would I start doing 1,000? Like if I could do 1,000 right away, should I do 1,000 right away? Because with the forgiveness plan, if I'm only putting in paying $1,000 a month in loans, I'm still going to have like a great surplus of other money left over.
That's a good question. And what I would say is first focus on your 401k. So get the 401k going with $750 a paycheck. And if you feel like you can do that right off the bat, then do that right off the bat. And $750 a paycheck is what you'd want to focus on first for the 401k. And then if you still have money left over, then put the $1,000 a month right away into the investment account instead of 100. So if you feel like you can jumpstart those two things, that's fine. The only thing that I would say is remember also that you have to build up your emergency fund to $20,000 before you should be buying that luxury vehicle. So if your goal is to buy the luxury vehicle by November, you probably want to keep your 1,000 a month to 100 a month, and your 19,500 or 750 a paycheck probably down to 5% of your paycheck, so that you'll have a lot of excess funds that will be going into savings, so that you'll still be on track to buying that car in November.
Okay. So then maybe after I get the car, then I'll put $1,000 a month in, per se.
Celebrate.
What?
Right. Yeah. And doing the 750 per paycheck into the retirement account.
Okay. I'm just taking notes.
It's good. That's what we do when we're doing the real thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So Travis,
So,
you've given good information so far. Let me just kind of backtrack to what you were saying about a car. So a lot of students have asked us, can you buy a car under your LLC or under your practice and just, kind of write it off there? What are your thoughts about doing that? Because some students have said like, should I just wait like a couple years until I buy it and until I buy the practice and then buy the car through the practice? So what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, my thoughts are, if you don't have kids, then the kind of car you're going to want when you have kids is going to be different from the kind of car you're going to have now. Like, so I'll just use myself as an example. Like up until the point where my wife and I had having a child, we don't really feel like we needed the big SUV. Like a sedan was fine, and so, I mean, there could be an argument for waiting on the SUV until you do a buy-ins. I'll say that deducting the vehicle expense is a debatable thing in the CPA community. I've heard people say it both ways. I've heard some people say that's a little bit too aggressive. That's personal use. You can't do that. Other people have said, well, if you do X, Y, and Z, then you can show it's used more for the business than any other thing. And then, you can use it. So, I mean, I'll say that's kind of like, the tax deduction just shouldn't be the influencing factor. Like, if you love cars and you've already got a practice that's producing a ton of income for you and you're well above average for the average practice owner income, go buy your car. And if you can deduct it, great. If you can't, it doesn't matter. But if you're an associate just starting out, just kind of realize that, if you sign up for the brand new vehicle, that's one of the worst things that you could do straight out of the gate.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. And thank you for bringing that up. Cause, who said that? Tom Wheelwright, or it was like some Tom Wheelwright Kiyosaki conversation. And they said you should not direct your purchases and all that stuff according to tax deductions. Like, that's not how you should live your life, according to tax deductions. You should do, whatever's best for your business first. And, okay. So first of all, before all this, congrats on having a baby. Wow. That's awesome.
Pretty scary during the COVID era, right?
Yeah. That's incredible. I mean, when did you say the babies due?
September. So, you caught me a month before paternity leave. So, anybody listening to this, I'm taking a month of paternity leave. So, if you book, later than September 1st, you'll be working one of the team members, but I am coming back in probably in October sometime. So I'm just taking a little bit of a break. The good news now, Student Loan Planner is big enough to exist without me. So we have a team of people and they do the vast majority of the work. And there's just, a couple kind of business operations kind of things I'm going to try to set up and make sure it just kind of runs on autopilot. That's kind of when I heard Laurie talking about, wanting to join a group practice. I think that, don't underestimate the ability to just pay cash to fix problems. I mean, if you did find a really lucrative practice and you're just looking for somebody to cover the business for you for 2 months, there's plenty of options out there for that, locums type jobs. So I understand where you're coming from. It's a real personal preference, what somebody wants to do. But I will say be cautious a little bit because, and I can say this because Aspen is a big DSO. So just any kind of like DSO groups, like some of them try to pitch you on like ownership, like owning some of their stock basically and opening multiple offices with them and growing your income that way. And that's not necessarily a terrible thing, particularly if you're married to another dentist who's doing more of a traditional, solo practitioner route. But the promises that I've always seen for DSO, practice ownership and partnership agreements don't usually live up to the hype, in my opinion. Just basically they kind of promise you the moon and tell you how great things are going to be. But ultimately you have to realize that whenever you enter into an agreement that's not just a straight up equal partnership, you're basically trading marketing services and, HR services and software for, a percentage of revenue in a fixed costs business. And
right.
that's not, I mean, there's a reason I don't like to pay people in my business a percentage of revenue. It's because it's way more expensive than just paying to get the service in your business. And so that's how these DSOs are so profitable, is they know that they can go out and hire the dentists. And that's the hard part, is doing the dentistry. The easy part, even though dentists don't feel this way, is the marketing and the software and the HR and stuff like that. And simply the reason it's easy is just because you can hire people to do it.
Right. And I mean, exactly what you said. That's the problem, is that dentists think that that's the hard part, but they don't teach any of that stuff to us in school. Like, we don't have any sort of business courses. I mean, we got a business club, but we don't learn that stuff. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to bring to our community, our audience, is people like you who are very knowledgeable and just give your advice, because you're going to be helping, thousands and thousands of people. So
let me suggest this. So, coronavirus aside, besides the coronavirus, which sounds like a cop out, the default rate for dental practices is like 0.3% historically. So 3 in 1,000 dental practices fail. So 3 in 1,000 failure rate, find me anything and you would love those odds, right? Like if I had a stage 4 cancer diagnosis and they told me my survival odds were 99.7%, I'm celebrating, right? Because there's a risk that something bad could happen, but it's such a low risk, relatively speaking, that I'm fine, right? So that's the kind of thing that people should know about ownership, and like the fact that you didn't get taught those things, Seth, in school. Is the good news is you picked a career where you don't have to be a genius marketer to survive and make a good living. People need dentistry. If people can only go so far, even in a pandemic, right? Somebody goes out and they're doing target shooting with BB guns or something, and they shoot something that knocks all their teeth out. Like, or there's some sort of ache or pain, people just can't stop drinking, right? Because it's a pandemic and people are depressed. So people are just downing, Jack Daniels in one hand and Mountain Dew 2-liter in the other.
Right.
That's going to cause a lot of problems that y'all will need to fix down the road at some point,
Yeah.
And, I know people are not going on dates right now, but eventually, those chipped front teeth are going to have to get fixed if, people want to be able to get anybody to go out with them. Right. So I'm joking around, but it's like, you guys have a very valuable skill, and it's a skill that's not easily competed with because you have to get a license and take on 400,000 of debt to get it. So that's a very valuable thing. And I want to really stress that. So the thing is the marketing, the HR stuff, you learn that. But guess what? You have iTunes and Spotify and podcasting, right? So and you'll find it, right? You'll find it about dental marketing or HR solutions or collecting doubtful accounts. Like, you'll find an episode about that with some good podcast. And the cool thing about dental podcasts is I've yet to find one that's like really lousy. Like, they're all pretty good.
Right.
So, you can just go in there and look up whatever thing you're trying to learn about and listen to it. That you've learned enough to do it. Because again, you're not looking at like in a pizza shop where you've got a 50% failure rate. It's a 0.3% failure rate. So, I mean, with that kind of odds, all you got to do is just like Google and just listen to a couple hours of something and just give it a go, and it's probably going to work out.
Right. Go ahead, Lori.
I have some more questions for you, actually. So if I'm going to go and do the forgiveness plan, well, what about refinancing? Like, would I refinance it all then?
So you would not refinance. The reason is because when you refinance, you take away all federal forgiveness options and repayment options. So when you refinance, you get a lower interest rate, but now you have to pay that $4,000 a month we were talking about.
So if you refinance, loan forgiveness doesn't exist.
Correct. Now, one thing I think you should do now that you've just graduated is consolidate your loans. So consolidation is different from refinancing. Seems like it would be the same thing, but it's actually different. So what a consolidation does is it just takes all of your loans you've ever had and it just puts them into one loan that's easy to manage and easy to keep track of. It doesn't change anything about the interest rate. It doesn't change anything about the terms or anything. So what you can do to do that is just go to studentaid.gov, studentaid.gov, and then there's a little thing at the top that says manage loans, and you can hover over that, and it's got a bunch of drop downs, and you'll see one pretty clearly that says apply for consolidation. And then you just literally go through that step-by-step process where they're going to ask you your name and, address and check all the loans you want to include. And it'll be pretty obvious that you'll want to include all of them. And then you just go through that loan application process, and that'll consolidate your loans. And, they'll ask you what payment plan you want to select. You're going to want to choose pay as you earn is what I would suggest, because pay as you earn is going to give you the 20-year forgiveness instead of the 25-year forgiveness with the revised pay as you earn.
Okay, so then I'll do that. And then how do I defer the loans? Because you can technically defer for 6 months following graduation, right?
So you're actually right. You're not going to want to defer actually, because by deferring, your payments are $0 a month with income-based repayment right now, and they're also $0 if you defer, but deferment doesn't count. So you might as well get credit towards forgiveness and pay $0 a month rather than defer and get no credit for forgiveness. So that's why I'm suggesting doing the consolidation after you've graduated. The reason is because what you can do is, have you earned your first paycheck yet?
No.
Okay, so you currently do not have an income then technically.
Right.
So what you can do is go to that consolidation application and complete it, and they're going to ask you for proof of income. And for proof of income, you can simply give your tax return. And your tax return from last year, and if you haven't filed one, you can still go in and file one, because you didn't make an income, presumably. So when you submit your proof of income, you will be able to claim a $0 taxable income, which is going to result in a payment, which is 10% of $0. And 10% of $0 is $0.
Right.
So now you've got a $0 payment locked in for 12 months. And
but during those 12 months, if I want to pay some money towards it, is that necessary? Like, is that a good idea?
It's going to be a bad idea. And the simple reason is that you want to do one of two things: pay the loan off really fast or pay it with forgiveness. And paying it with forgiveness means pay as little as possible, rather than as much as possible, because you want to get more forgiven rather than less forgiven, right? And also you want to think about your student loans are either a debt or a tax. If they're a debt, you want to just pay them off. But for most dentists, with the size of the debt, especially at private dental schools and higher cost dental schools, it's really better to think about the debt as a tax. So you're going to have to pay 10% of your income for 20 years. And at the end of those 20 years, it's forgiven, right? So if you're paying an income tax, paying extra on your loans is akin to paying a higher amount in income taxes when all you owed was, 50,000, but you decided you wanted to pay 80. Well, that 30,000, you're not going to get a gold star for. You just lost that money that you could have used for something that actually benefited you.
Okay.
And your loan balance is going to grow. It's going to get big, and that's okay, because you're joining 3 million other people in America that have more than 100,000 of student loan debt.
Right.
So 3 million people having 6 figures of student loan debt, that's a problem that got created when they never capped borrowing for student loans. So if they capped borrowing, the dental schools would only have, say, 150,000 to work with, and they would only be able to probably get approved for that amount, and they'd have to keep costs down. But on the flip side, maybe a lot of dental schools that currently are in business might go out of business if they had to only charge 150,000 because of all the, expensive startup costs and faculty costs and things like that. So at the worst case scenario, you can think about your income, 137,500, and knock off like 10% of it. And that's your net income as a dentist, debt free. So in other words, just take away 10% off of your income and assume that's for the loans. And then maybe also additionally, in your case, take off $1,000 a month for that investing account for the tax bomb in the future, just in case. And then whatever that net number is, that's the number that you want to compare against if you had just gotten a bachelor's degree and gotten a job straight out of undergraduate. And so I'm going to guess that 137,500 minus 10% minus 1,000 a month is still a number that's probably double what you would have made as a undergraduate. I would just, for typical undergraduate.
Probably like triple in how.
Maybe triple. Yeah. So triple the income for, comparing those two jobs. Well, then you made a great decision. And if you at some point decide you don't want to be a dentist, well, I've got good news. It's always a tax. So it's a 10% tax, whether or not you're being a dentist or whether or not you decide you want to go and, I don't know, become a professional scuba diving instructor or something. I mean, I'm just picking something random, right? So the good news is you can always think about your loans as a tax, which means that you would not let your student loans inhibit you any more than you would be inhibited if you lived in California paying 10% state income tax versus living in Florida. And certainly there's plenty of people in California that pay, higher income taxes than Floridians and live a good life and still hang out on the beach.
Right. So then also with the loans and like bringing kids into the picture, like, so if I'm paying, like loan forgiveness, and then once I have children, like at least my parents had paid for like prepaid college and like put money away. So like, what are your thoughts on something like that as well?
So I'm kind of a fan of putting money away in something like a 529 to at least cover undergraduate for a kid. Some of the dentists I talked to actually kind of got screwed over because the undergraduate's loan rules were, if you borrow before October 2007, then you have a worse forgiveness plan offered to you. Okay. So it's kind of nice being able to go into your graduate school with a clean slate. And undergraduate, that's possible if you're going into an in-state school. If you're going to a out-of-state school, I would say, or a private school, I mean, it just kind of depends on your personal preferences, right? So, I mean, I would say if you don't want to support them, then they might not be able to go. But the future of education, I have no idea what it'll be when my child is going to college. I have no idea because it's already overpriced. So is it going to get even more overpriced, or like, are people going to be able to do online courses and have the price fall a lot? Or are we going to have like a on-the-job training thing? Like what's, kind of what I think might happen is you'll see more kind of apprenticeship type programs and like a decline of like college at like the kind of like the everyman college kind of schools, like, the schools that are not particularly selective, that are just sort of people go there, right? I think those schools will probably decline or go out of existence in a lot of cases. And I think that the, flagship state universities and the community colleges and the, elite, very, very elite colleges will stay around. And so maybe they'll charge similar prices. I don't know. But if you want to prepare for your child to go to college, then I would add to that list of things, open a 529 and put $500 a month per child away for college.
Per child per spouse, so 1,000 a month, or
Per child, like, so 500 total in the marriage, like one kid.
so $500 per month per child.
Right. And you know, if you're living in Florida, Florida prepaid is obviously an option. And then you can do, you know, the 529 version, which is a little different, you know. So that's just, you're preparing for any school in the country versus, you know, a school in Florida. But, you know, if you know, that's just a good idea if you're thinking, well, we want the kid to go to, you know, we want the kid to go to the most, you know, University of Miami or something. Well, you're going to need to save at least that $500 a month to make that happen.
And then also, so the loan, I'll put like 5% into a 401k per month, and then like 100 to up to maybe 1,000 in the investment. And then, so like, do you have recommended percentages of like that I should not want to exceed of my income for rent, for entertainment, for insurance, you know?
Yeah, like what I like to tell people is, if you are thinking about trying to get pregnant, get term life insurance and get disability insurance right away, because you can be alive and have to cover your own expenses, right, with disability insurance. Whereas if you have term life insurance, you no longer have to cover your own expenses. So, you know, get disability right away. Probably that's going to be $100 a month to $200 a month. It shouldn't be that expensive.
That's going to be like about $250 a month for $7,150 worth of coverage. That's like the max I can get right now.
Yeah.
That would be best. I don't have life insurance yet because I don't have kids and I'm not married.
Yeah, I would keep it that way. I mean, eventually you might get term life and make sure it's term, and then you should probably be paying, you know, $30 to $50 a month for it.
Okay.
So it should not be some sort of 3-digit monthly number. If it is, it's whole life insurance, and that's not what you need. So, you know, you just want to get something that's a 2-digit monthly number for your life insurance. And again, just get that in place well before you're thinking about trying to have kids, because, you know, it's just a good thing to get in place before any potential, you know, we hope no complications, but, you know, sometimes those things can happen, right, with pregnancy, and it's harder to get insured.
What if it's best to get once I'm married, right?
You could. I mean, you're only talking about $30 to $50 a month, right? So that's not that big of an expense. So if it's easier just to get it done and out of the way, then I would say go do that. If you're more of like, I'll remember to do it, you know, then you technically don't need the money until, you know, you have a kid.
And then another question, this is, I guess, like kind of a detailed question that like you might not know the answer. What would be a realistic amount of money to spend on a wedding without being crazy and like really breaking the bank?
So my wife and I spent $15,000 on our wedding, and we had to get creative to do that though. So we had the wedding in downtown New Orleans, in the Garden District. And so the first thing for us was we wanted to find a place that would let us bring our own booze and food. That's probably number one, is being able to bring your own booze and food, because otherwise you'll get screwed. Second thing is get event insurance when we're eventually allowed to have in-person weddings again. Just because this was like a $1 million mansion or something like that. And all I could think about was one of my college buddies just getting totally wasted and accidentally, you know, setting a fire and burning the place down. Right. So, so we got coverage for that. It's usually like a couple $100 for, you know, event insurance. And then, so I think, you know, anything between 10 and 20,000 is reasonable for a wedding. I think you can do it for that. You're just going to have to follow that rule about making sure that no matter what, the place lets you bring your own food and drinks. And so that's really the key. I mean, I don't really have any kind of, I mean, obviously you could go into a lot of detail with that, but I think that in general, just as long as you control that, you control what you need to. And that's kind of what personal finance is all about, is not making like a gazillion rules. It's kind of like pick a few, like pick like 3 to 5 and just try to live with those rules. And that's it. And you don't have to think about everything that way. So with the housing thing, you know, if you can keep your housing expenses to like 25% of your after-tax income or less, then you're in good shape. 25% might be tough, but you know, 25% is kind of a good guideline. Like a quarter of your income or less should be going to rent. And if you can't achieve that, then maybe you need to be more creative. Maybe again, like roommates or significant other kind of thing. You know, you want to try to keep that, rental cost is, low. And then the good news about entertainment is I'm assuming everybody on the podcast is in their 20s.
Right.
Is that correct?
You got
So, so you're only in your 20s once, and I just turned 30. So I can tell you that I already regret missing out on some things that I should have done in my 20s, So I was in South Africa once. They went diving with great white sharks in a cage. I don't see a lot of 30-something-year-olds doing that. The 20-something-year-olds do that, right? So the idea is like you only are young once, and you should live it up. You should have a really fun time. And the cool thing is if you're careful with your rental expense, then you can go blow a bunch of money on your entertainment budget, and it's not going to matter that much. So kind of what I like to say is, especially like, I don't know what it is, like about guys, but like we'll go spend like $200 on a bar tab, and I've yet to see a woman do that unless she's doing it for like a bunch of girlfriends or something. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Right
Cause
now.
yeah, well, no offense. Right. But so I'm just saying we're doing this for Laurie. We're not doing this for Matt or Seth, so, so
That's right.
So it's like a realistic amount of money to spend on the weekend to not feel guilty, or like I do have a shopping addiction that needs to be put under control. So like
Okay.
could shopping be under an entertainment thing? Like obviously, like you said, I didn't go to dental school, take out all these loans to live like a poor person, obviously. Like if I wanted, like I do have a goal of something I want to buy myself, like for Hanukkah, that
yeah.
$1,500, but like, is that a bad idea?
No, just set aside money for it. So if you have a goal, like what I would encourage you to do, if you have like some of these things that you'd like to improve and you're like on a self-improvement binge, just sign up for something like mint.com or sign up for something like youneedabudget.com. And that'll just basically help you plan for those goals that you want to spend money on and not feel guilty. So for example, my wife's super into expensive dresses. Like she really likes it and she looks good. Like that's her thing. Right. And so the strategy there is we came up and agreed on like an amount of money per month that she can go and spend guilt-free. And that's kind of the point, is to enjoy life and not restrict yourself to rice and beans and goodable clothing. I mean, that works for some people, maybe like myself, but most people want more than that. Right. So it's kind of like come up with that monthly amount, and just figure out what you're comfortable with. And I think, I would say clothing, anything between 200 and 1,000 a month is probably reasonable. If you're, anything, it's a wide range because it just depends on how important it is to you, just kind of keep in mind that for every $1,000 a month you're spending, that's equivalent to like, kind of like a month and a half at the dental office. Right. So so I guess maybe another way to look at it is like every $200 extra per month that you're adding to spending is like a week at the dental office that you lost.
So
if that makes sense.
For the weekend, like say between Seth and I, like $200 a weekend was spent, but like obviously he's still in school and I'm not. So like if I put 150 towards it and he put like 50, just to like put something towards it. So if I spent like $600 a month on entertainment, is that ridiculous?
No, actually the goal would be to have Seth borrow it through student loans and to have it all come out of Seth's expense. So that would be the ideal, is for you to not have to put anything on there, because that money actually is money that's not getting invested, right? Whereas money that is coming out of student loans, you're going for forgiveness with. So like sometimes I have people that borrowed for school that like were like, yeah, I wish I had partied less in dental school. And then it's kind of awkward because I have to tell them, well, actually, you probably should have partied more because you're just going for forgiveness anyway. So, if you have an extra $50,000, like it wouldn't have really made much of a difference at all. And so, that $50,000 would have bought you a lot of extra drinks. I mean, heck, you could have bought your class a few drink rounds, and it would have been fine. So I'm joking a little bit, but I think that the 200 a weekend is no problem at all. I've never seen somebody's budget be busted because of that. So I'm not worried about it, Lori. I'm worried about the car expense and the housing expense, and that's it. So if you try to be as frugal as you possibly can be on the housing and the car stuff, you can go, the good news is like you can only drink so much until your liver fails and then you have to stop, right? Whereas, housing expense, that doesn't really stop. It's like, oh, now I have a $40 million house, right? I mean, when you're super rich. Whereas with with, even rich people do not spend more probably than a certain amount of money on booze just because you just physically cannot. So that's one reason. Now, some of the guys are looking at me like, test me, right? But, but the thing is, that's why all you have to worry about is the cars and the houses, and everything else kind of falls into place if you're careful with those two things.
I just have one more question. So once I put like the money into the investment fund, the retirement fund, rent, and whatever, say I have $3,000 left, would it be best to put that into a savings or put that $3,000 like into the investment?
Maybe a little bit of both. Maybe a little bit into savings, a little bit into investments, right? Whenever you're kind of unsure what to do, don't put anything towards the loans, but maybe like when you're trying to decide between, do I pay off my car loan? Do I put it into my savings? Do I put it into investments? Maybe do a little bit of all three. There's not a wrong answer. The main thing is savings rate. So if that money's going into growing your wealth, like savings, investments, paying down car loans, paying down credit cards, any of those are good decisions. The decision that you want to compare it against is going out and spending the money, which is going to set you back.
Okay, so just not spending it ideally would be the most ideal, and putting it into those things.
Right, but again, don't feel guilty about spending money. It's kind of like, again, get the big things right. The biggest two expenses in your budget, keep those cautious, and everything else just go crazy.
Okay, great.
Travis, I think you meant to say to just donate it to Matt, whatever's left.
Yeah. So Venmo at, whatever,
Wait, what was the one that they did at College Game Day where he had the sign with his Venmo on it?
Yeah. Send beer money. Yeah. I think that guy, I don't know, I can't remember. I think that guy had some troubling Twitter posts or something. So then he had to donate it to some charity or so. If just in case you get a couple 100,000 on Twitter or on Venmo, you got to go check your Twitter, make sure you haven't said anything stupid.
Right.
Put it towards my account.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, the good news is, you picked a good career. Even if there's a lot of pressure with dentistry, you're still way better off than a lot of other people out there. And it's not like it's, the 1970s and people are making money hand over fist and dental practices cost nothing. But at the same time, you have the internet. So like what I like to tell people is like, yeah, you have a difficult path, a little bit more difficult path than people back in the day, maybe. Right. But then again, you also have more opportunity. So what I would really say is like, you have more variance.
Right.
And that scares people sometimes because you're like, oh shoot, like I don't have this easy path to making 300,000 like my family friend or uncle or somebody that I admired as a dentist. But you can still have whatever path you want. And the cool thing is that path now includes, women, people of color, right? Dentistry's open to a lot more people than it used to be too. It's not just old white guys anymore.
Right.
So I think that's cool. You can kind of live whatever life you want to live, anything from working part-time, remember, because student loans are a tax. So for example, Lori, or Seth, if y'all wanted to work 2 days a week, make $60,000 a year and pay a 10% tax, and you had your expenses, within the realm of what they needed to be. How many teachers would kill to work 2 days a week and make the same amount of income? Right. So that's an option. And then also working 6 days a week, making $350,000 a year is also an option. So you can't ask for more than that.
I gotcha. So first of all, thank you so much. Like you've given so much great detail. Lori, that was very applicable, bringing up the thing about a wedding, because I feel like so many students push off their weddings until after dental school. Like that, how many friends do you have right now that are getting married, So Travis, last couple questions for you. Can you give us some good resources that you like for some information for students? And then of course, how to reach out to you and your company.
Planner Podcast is our show, and we cover things like this all the time. So people will probably enjoy listening to that if they like listening to this show. And in the Student Loan Planner blog, which is just studentloanplanner.com, you can check that out. Other resources, I like all the podcasts out there. I think that's just great to just binge a lot of those. So, Dentistry Uncensored, Shared Practices, Dentalpreneur, those are the couple of the ones that I like to listen to. So I think just, having a regular diet of dental podcasts is probably a good idea. And then, I think that in terms of just like general, maybe just general stuff, I mean, I think that, and that's really, I guess, most of the stuff I can think of. I mean, if you listen to those podcasts, you're going to learn everything. And then in terms of the student loans, obviously we do paid consults where, we get even more granular than I can get on a podcast, and we'll do screen sharing and I'll show people resources. And Lori, I might just, if I had extra time, I probably would look for like some examples of luxury cars that, that might be kind of fun to look at, so, but we really do focus on the students. We get a plan for that. So if somebody's interested, so if somebody's interested in that, we generally save people a projected 100 times what the few $100 fee is, just because people just are not aware of the options. So that's studentloanplanner.com/help. So just go studentloanplanner.com/help. You'll learn all about that. And yeah, like I said, a few $100 and catch me before paternity leave.
Right.
Thank you so much for this information. This was really good. Hello?
So, yeah, I'm sorry, it just froze on me there. I'm back, I think.
No, thank you very, very much for all the information, because this put everything like into perspective, and now I have like a path to go, because like now I'm just going to go log on to studentaid.gov and consolidate my loans right now, because I might as well. So
yeah,
that's what I'm going to, literally what I'm going to do when we hang up. So thank you very, very much for your time. Do you have an email address, like if I had any questions that you would respond to?
Yeah, well, so for the anybody on the podcast can email us at help@studentloanplanner.com, and we'll reach out to you. And Lori, in your case, just kind of mentioned that we had already spoken,
Okay.
Because the good news is we get a lot of questions, or a lot of people reaching out, I mean, that's a good problem to have, but I can't be in there answering in the emails all day. So we have, my assistant helps me with that. So just, but to reach out, like seriously, if anybody's listening to this, send us an email and just, tell us about your situation, and we'll be frank with you. If we think you're an obvious refinancing case, we're not going to ask you to pay a few $100 for a detailed analysis. So I'm just going to send you to the refinancing page to just shop for lower rates. If you're unsure, I'll help. I can pretty well identify that in an email, and I'll tell you that you need to book a plan. But people that work with us don't have anxiety about their loans after they get through the details, just because you just need a clear plan. And once you have that plan, you can move on and just focus on the other more important things in life.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I feel like kind of relieved now, in all honesty. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Travis, and thank you, Lori.
All right, guys, it's Matt Havas again, and I hope you guys enjoyed this interview with Travis Hornsby and Dr. Lori Gruskin as we sit down and see how a consultation is done for student loan planning and budgeting. As always, follow us on Instagram at dental.student.vibes. Give us a like, comment, follow, share it with a friend. Let's make this the best podcast we can for you. And as always, stay safe and vibe on.